Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I'm your host, Paul O'Need, and as usual, our podcast is brought to you by Coach's Corner University. Use code podcast300 to save $300 off of our continuing education platform, The Education Collective, with almost 200 hours of continuing education resources, as well as discounts on all of our courses. We're also sponsored by TC Nutrition, Barefoot Shoes, and baconandbarbells.com. You can visit the description below for all of the links there. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by, one of my favorite people in strength and conditioning, someone who I've looked up to for a very long time, former strength and conditioning coach at the University of Buffalo, Nate Harvey. Nate, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, buddy. Pleasure's all mine. I'm not sure why you would call this a pleasure, but I'll take it.
Dude, you're the fucking best. So I told Nate that I would start off with the story of how we met. Nate, multi-ply powerlifter, squatted 1,000 pounds in competition. I was a very young powerlifter at the time. I think it was probably around like 2009, 2010. We were both doing the RPS powerlifting meet in New York State, the New York State Championships in Rochester. And I go into the bathroom and I see this massive human being running his hands under cold water. And I couldn't help but notice his hands looked like he was wearing like Mickey Mouse's gloves. Like they were just so swollen. And I had no idea what was going on. And I ended up asking him what the deal was. And he gave me an explanation. Nate, do you want to kind of explain why your hands were so swollen?
Had nothing to do with my diet or any of nutritional factors going into the meet, I'm sure. But like you said, I quit powerlifting. We wore the bench shirts and stuff. So after the bench, all that fluid and stuff is like kind of pushed down to your hands. Mm-hmm. And I was did a pretty good job of dropping deadlifts, usually one or two at each meet I did. And I can't remember who told me about it, but they said they knew somebody who would take like an ice cooler to the meet and after bench stick their hands in it to try to get the swelling down so they can hold on to the bar better. And I was too lazy to pack a cooler, so I just went in the bathroom and I was holding my hands underwater. I remember you came in, you're like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
I've actually used that trick whenever I'm wrapping clients' knees at competitions. My hands get really swollen from wrapping knees and like the abrasion of the wraps. So I'll go into the bathroom in between attempts and just run my hands under cold water. It does a great job.
That's a good idea. I've never thought of that.
Listen, I'm a parallel thinker. I could get these ideas and I just take them with me. Maybe for the listeners who don't know your backstory, give a little bit of a background on where you're at in strength conditioning, like where you came from.
So currently I'm still in Buffalo, New York. My main thing is selling gym equipment for Elite FTS, which is cool because, coming up in kind of the era I came up in, that was like the main source of information for a lot of people. So I kind of, that kind of helped me get my job and stuff just with all the knowledge and everything as I was coming up through grad school. And even before that, I kind of started right around like almost when the site started around like 2000, I really started diving in, and Coach Axe and Buddy and, all those guys were on there. So I coached for 10 years in the college sector. Got out of there. We had a new AD come in and we didn't see eye to eye for whatever reason. And I thought weird. Everybody thought things. It's really weird because like, had you looked at my resume and everything that was going on at that time, like everybody was winning, injuries were down. So like when I got let go, it was kind of a big surprise, everybody, myself included. But looking back, I could kind of see when he came in, there were certain things I would ask for and we couldn't get it done or whatever. So anyways, I was lucky enough. Matt Goodwin, our sales director, he was like, hey, we might have a job open. Are you interested? And I was like, hell yeah. Because I put all my eggs in the college strength and conditioning coach basket. You know what I mean?
Of course.
I was like, am I going to go work at Wegmans or what's next? You know what I mean? So he's like, we might have a spot open. Would you be interested? And I was like, definitely, and I go, well, what is it? He goes, I want to bring another salesman on. And I was like, I'm in, but I'm going to warn you, I'm not really a salesman. You know what I mean? Like I never thought of myself. He's like, don't worry about it, dude. People come in, they have quite, like you help them out, use your knowledge and help people out, and it worked out. So that's basically what I'm doing now. I'm doing a little bit of online coaching and some consulting and stuff. I'm really trying to. I kind of grew up in this area,
Mhm.
and like I said, I started training like most of us when I was like 12 or whatever, and I had no resources. Like I grew up in a small town. We didn't have a weight room. We used to have to drive a half hour to go get like muscle and fitness to get any training information.
Yep.
This was before the internet. Um, like we didn't have a weight room in my high school. So and it's still like, I feel like our area in New York State is like, I go out to Ohio and see some of these weight rooms and they have strength coaches and everything. And it's like, we're so far behind, and
Yep.
it's a little bit of it is a culture, the emphasis on athletics is not the same as it is in Ohio. Ohio's kind of up there with Florida and, Texas and all that kind of stuff. They're kind of on that tier.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, and I go into some of the local weight rooms and just like, you guys, we can do better for our kids. You know what I mean? We can do better. We
Yeah.
can get better coaching for our kids. There's actually some resources, so that's kind of like within my job, kind of like my little passion project. I'm trying to get out locally and get some better coaching and equipment for the kids.
How does Conjugate You come into this? Because I noticed you started posting a lot more about, I think you had a podcast. You started posting more on YouTube about Conjugate You. Like, what is that?
So that was just actually Hammer
Mm-hmm.
um, invited, that's how we met.
Yep.
He invited me down to talk at his seminar he was doing at Robert Morris the one year.
Yep.
It was soon after that meet that we met at, and I hadn't really gone out and talked much, and I went down and spoke, and then I got back and I was talking with my assistant, and I'm like, because we had Paul Childress in the area,
Mm-hmm.
Julia Anto, who was with the lead at the time. I came in under Buddy Morris, and those two were also there. And then Ryan Groneman, who we were talking about, Joe Ken earlier, he played at Boise State when Joe was out of Boise State, and his senior year was the year that they kind of turned things around. Like they'd been a shitty program, and then his senior year they went undefeated and made a bowl game and all that. So he was under Joe Ken for quite a while, and I got to come in and learn under that group of people, kind of like an all star cast at our little Division I school at the time.
Yeah, man.
Um,
I remember that staff was like you, Julia, Paul. Like, that's a fucking all star team of
yeah,
coaches.
yeah, it was like and it was weird that it kind of things worked out the way they did. Like I did my grad work at UB, and I
Mm-hmm.
had heard of the guy who was there before Buddy, and
Yep.
I knew he was a Joe Ken guy, so he was kind of along the same lines of thinking. So we kind of moved up, and I'm like, I'm gonna get in over there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then like 2 weeks before I was gonna start my final internship it was Cheyenne Petrie was there before Buddy. They were like, hey, Cheyenne's leaving. So I was like, oh shit, like we moved up to Buffalo, and I did my grad school, and now this dude's leaving. And then like 3 weeks later or whatever, Buddy came in, and then he brought Paul in, and Julia was already there. And so yeah, it was like pretty crazy how all that stuff worked out.
Talk,
But
I was gonna
yeah,
say,
go ahead.
talk to me about Paul, because Paul passed recently, and he's someone who I don't think got nearly enough credit for the influence that he had on strength and conditioning, but powerlifting as a whole. Um, how did he influence you?
I, it was like it kind of I'd been studying the stuff like the conjugate stuff
Mm-hmm.
for like 10 years. I got like kind of stumbled onto it my senior year of college. So I'm studying and I'm putting all this stuff in place. And then I kind of he came in the same time we did. And I got to watch him and his group train. Everything like clicked. Like, you hear about dynamic effort and these things and pushing weight fast and all that stuff. So it was like all the stuff I had been studying. Then I got to go learn under like one of the top guys ever to do it. You know what I mean? So it was a
Mm-hmm.
huge influence. Um, I'm asking. I always felt like the little cartoon, the little bulldog that like hops around and follows the big bulldog. Like,
Yeah.
what do we do now? You know what I mean? It was kind of one of those things. But he was, Paul. I think from somebody who didn't know him may have had a reputation of being kind of a hard ass or abrasive, or the people that had that view. No one had that problem with Paul as long as you were doing what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like if
Yep.
he saw that you were there to work and you were serious about things, he would take all the time in the world. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Super generous with his information, and it's just yeah, he it's like it's funny, like the old Circa Max
Yep.
uh cycle that Louis used to run.
Mm-hmm.
Paul pretty much, from my understanding, kind of explained that to Lou.
Well,
You know what I
that's
mean?
pretty
So
significant.
yeah, so like he wasn't at Westside all the time, but it was like we had Westside right in our office. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt.
So it was, you know, and he just had a huge I hope he understood like how far his reach was and how many people he impacted. I'm not sure
Yeah.
he did, but that probably happens like that with a lot of people.
I think in most cases, like, it's only after someone's passing that you truly appreciate the contributions that they've made. And I think I kind of make it a priority of mine to really tell people along the way how much they've impacted me and how much they've done for me. Like even, yourself, I mentioned it's a pleasure to have you on here. I remember, I was just looking for other opportunities to learn, and lo and behold, I'm driving to and from Ontario a few times a year. And you're like, yeah, man, break up your drive, come train in the weight room. There were times when I would train in the weight room, there'd be other teams in there. So I got to be a fly on the wall while you were coaching. And at the time, I was just looking for any opportunity to see how anyone else did stuff, because I was always looking for different ways to accomplish the goal. And at the time, people would talk about conjugate, but I had never really seen it implemented in a college weight room. But it just made the most sense to me because of training multiple qualities at the same time. I'm wondering, one of the things that I love speaking with strength coaches about is the ability to adapt your philosophies to the philosophies of a sport coach that may not be perfectly aligned. Can you speak a little bit about how you went about maybe educating your sport coaches and adapting your approach to feed into the things that they wanted and needed?
Yeah, that's tough. So when I was younger, you know, there weren't a lot of people doing this stuff, and we would always talk shop back and forth. So I think when I was younger, I would get into like the technical stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like, oh, today we're doing power and we'll use 50%, but we'll move it real fast and that'll help them be more explosive. And then this day we're going to go do something heavy and that's going to help raise their athletic ceiling because, you know, maximal strength is the ceiling to all sporting qualities. And
Yeah.
towards the end, I would go in and be like, what do you need from me? I think if we listen a little more and talk less, it helps.
Uh,
Um,
yes.
you know, so I was like, okay, they need a quicker first step, and it almost got to the point where I wouldn't even explain things too much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, okay, you want a quicker first step? Okay, we'll do that. You know, Monday we're going to work on that stuff, and then we'll work some others. You know, it's almost like don't give them too much information because then their wheels start turning, and they would sometimes want to. Well, shouldn't we do this? It'll almost be like, okay, we'll address that. Yes, we're going to get that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like get what try to figure out what they want and then just reassure them you're going to take care of that.
Yeah, I think that was one of my biggest challenges initially because as a young coach, admittedly, I was very stubborn. Like I knew the best way. And at the end of the day, I had to realize that I'm a staff member and I work for the sport coach. So it's my job to kind of give them what they need. And I didn't know how to listen initially. And I was hearing, but I wasn't listening. Right. You're listening to understand versus listening to respond. And I think there's a big difference between the two. And I found that, especially transitioning into my own business, when it comes to serving our clients, that skill has been infinitely valuable to me because so many people come to you with these preconceived notions of what they think they need or what they want. And it's your job to implement something that closely mimics what they think they want, but then also challenges their beliefs to bring them more towards what you know they need. That makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. That's where you got to find the balance, I think. Like you said, you have to take everything they need and what they want to do, but if you go too far, it's screwing up the program. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You said it really well. You have to redirect them. And I think that's probably the hardest part.
One thing that I really appreciated about being a fly on the wall in your weight room was the culture that you created around training. Like I could tell that all of your kids loved being there. What are some of the things that you did that maybe the listeners could take away when it comes to creating a culture in the weight room of hard training?
It's funny you bring this up because I remember, I can't remember exactly when it was, but probably when I started getting on social media more, and everybody's starting to talk about culture and buy-in and like, how do we do this? And it would piss me off so much. Like, and I got this from Grody, like, just do your fucking job. Just
Yeah.
give the kids some shit that actually works. And within 2 weeks, they're going to start feeling better. And there's your buy-in. Like they start feeling better. Their back doesn't bother them as much. And they notice, hey, I feel like I'm a little quicker. And like that stuff for the most part kind of took care of itself. So like I would just see all this stuff. And looking back, I get it because you need those things.
Uh-huh.
But and I was a little jaded too because I would sit in on some of these sport coach interviews. Like the sport coaches would come in and interview, and they'd ask like me or an athletic trainer, and they would come in and talk about this stuff. And then like there was a couple that kind of got the job, and then I'm like, I just think like, bro, you're a total hypocrite. Like you came in your interview and you're talking about leadership and culture and buy-in and all these things, and I watch you act on your job on a daily basis. It's like you're just full of shit, so that it kind of like
Yeah.
made me even more jaded to all that kind of talk of culture and buy-in. But like for me, it was just have a good program, and you kind of got to teach the kids how to train hard. Like
How do you do
they
that? How do you do that?
uh I think for us, like we had for the most part, we had pretty good kids,
Mm-hmm.
so it was easy to get a few to buy in and kind of do a good job, and then the others, the culture just
Yeah.
kind of shifted that way. Um, but to me, like I said, it was just have a good program, and like you have to be. I think you have to be genuinely enthusiastic about the kid's success.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not just clapping all the time and let's go and like I
Oh
used to
my
talk with
God. The
my
clappers. The clappers killed me.
like the manufactured enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Ugh, get out of here, man. You know what I mean? So like for us, it was just like when a kid was, and I had pretty good assistants too. When a kid was going up for a heavy lift they hadn't done before, like let's fucking go, man. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I think a lot of kids don't get that stuff nowadays because people are too afraid to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
It's
think
it's not a very common thing. I feel like.
one of the things, and I use the word culture, but I know it's very heavily overemphasized, like or overused. But I think the culture starts with the coach. And you mentioned being enthusiastic about what you're doing. That shows in the fact that you yourself were competing at a high level and the kids saw you train. So for me, when I'm posting my lifting on social media, because at first my social media was just a training log. It was like just a video training log. And that got me clients because people were like, well, if Paul's training as hard as he is, and I know that I need to work harder, I'm going to go work with Paul because he's going to teach me how to do that. So when you're doing, your max effort work, 800-pound squats in the collegiate weight room, that's just going to inspire kids to say like, okay, well, coach is pushing himself. We need to fucking push ourselves too. And walking the walk is something that whenever I hear a coach, and I've seen it more and more lately. Oh, I'm going to have to retire from powerlifting because I'm focusing too much on my clients. Immediate response, immediate like switch flip in my head. You're a fucking pussy.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No, like, and even now, I bet, like, I know you're not actively competing anymore because your body's destroyed like mine, but you're still fucking training.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Yeah. Like I may only have 3 plates in me right now, but you know what I mean? It'll be soon enough. It'll be 4.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we got into this because we just love training. So why are you going to stop that?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It's also it's the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to building a culture. Like, I look at our business and we have myself, who's, third strongest Canadian all time in my weight class. And then we have 2, and I've been top 10 all time. And then we have 2 IFBB pros and then a bunch of other studs. It's like, that in itself is going to attract clients who want to do the things that we want to do. So you don't really have to do anything special, as you said. And I'm going to make this the title of the podcast. It's like, do your fucking job.
Yeah.
Like, be the best person you can be and do your fucking job, and everything will go well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, as you've transitioned out of college strength and conditioning, did you try to get other jobs in college, or were you just kind of done with it?
I was pretty much done with it. We had a school, kind of crosstown Canisius. Their job was going to open up about the same time.
Okay.
And I had had good references. I had people who knew people over there. And my assistant at the time was, I don't know if he had worked with Canisius's AD prior to this, or he had a really good relation. Oh no, the Canisius AD was at UB one time. So my assistant had a real good relationship with him. And I was in my thinking was, we went back and forth in basketball with Canisius a little bit,
Yeah.
So my immediate thought was, all right, I'm going to go to Canisius and we're going to kick your ass. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And so I got all my stuff in, and I was thinking, I'm a shoe in for this. And I talked to my assistant, and he had talked to the AD at Canisius, and
Mm-hmm.
someone had told the AD at Canisius that I was like a my way or the highway type guy. And I was like, okay, somebody, you know what I mean? Like, somebody's trying to block me from going over there. And I was like, I'm not gonna move my family. I got 3 kids in school and stuff. My wife has, I'm not gonna move to Iowa for $50K a year. Stupid.
That was going to be my next question, is how much did your family play into your decision in terms of career?
A lot. My wife has always been super supportive, coming out of college and stuff. And, we kind of moved up, like I mentioned earlier, we moved up here and stuff so I could go to grad school and get the piece of paper I needed to coach and stuff. So, I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't going to drag them around for, a lateral financial move. It didn't make sense.
Yeah. And this is something I see quite often, especially in the college world, is like, when I had Joe on the podcast, he's talking about, oh yeah, well, we moved up to Boise, and then we moved down to Arizona, then we moved out to Cincinnati, to Kentucky, then we moved over to the Carolina. I'm like, your wife is a fucking saint. Like, I could not imagine moving my wife around the country just so I could make 50 grand a year.
Right. Right.
And the reality of college strength is, like, unless you're at one of these big schools, probably capped 50, 60K as a head strength coach.
Right.
And that's with a master's degree. In this economy, you're fucking broke.
Yeah. It's crazy, like the amount of experience and education and all the stuff you're supposed to have for these jobs, and they pay what they pay, but the market's so saturated. Dave talked about, you're going against people who are willing to live in their car for months just to get their foot in the door somewhere.
Yeah. And I mean, all due respect, like, when I moved down to South Florida, I remember working 4 different jobs to earn enough money, because as an international person, I wasn't allowed to earn any money in the US. So I had to have a savings account that would last me the 6 months of my internship. Luckily enough, I got into grad school, but now I'm doing a master's program. I'm an intern strength coach at a I think at the time was the Big East, and I'm working as an attendant at the student rec center to try and pay for my tuition. It's like I was willing to do that at that time, but
Yeah.
with if I had a wife and 3 kids, no fucking way.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you're doing some online stuff now. Like, what does that look like? Like, who are you coaching? What, like, are you still working with athletes? You transition over to Gen Pop? What does that look like?
Um, I have a few competitors, a lot of just like meathead guys, people that like to train.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of tough getting athletes. I had one younger athlete here a few months ago. She did awesome. It was an old high friend from high school who was getting her daughter into the weight room at 13 or whatever, and she's, playing basketball and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, honestly, I feel like that's where I can make the most difference. Like with
That
the
age
athlete, you know
group.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I probably like that's probably my top skill set, that where I can make the most difference.
Mm-hmm.
But like I understand, like not many kids' parents are gonna film their workouts and send it to me for feedback, and you know what I mean. That's more of a localized thing where you got to get them into the gym actually.
Are you still
Um,
working in a gym too, or no?
Not currently. I'm kind of working on some stuff, but my schedule is just crazy right now. So
Yeah, no doubt. I'm always interested to hear career transitions because I made two of them in my life when I went from collegiate strength and conditioning to stepping into the private sector, working in disability rehab, and then going into the online space. How hard was it leaving strength and conditioning from an identity perspective?
it was hard. Yeah, it was. That's who I was. Like people say, your identity is not your job or whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, I was 100%. I had, and a lot of, a lot of, a lot of collegiate athletes have a hard time. You know what I mean? Because that's their identity. I had the same thing getting out of college football, even though it was like only Division III. You know what I mean? Small school, whatever. It was tough, But luckily, I could take some of the things from coaching and kind of move them into this role.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Even though I was like, I'm still learning. Even just like the most basic sales things, like you have to follow up here and make this phone call, and all these little just daily, like what most people would consider like simple daily tasks.
Yeah.
Still learning. So there's still a ton of growth potential, I think, on the
Mhm.
sales stuff. And luckily, I was able to move into something that's somewhat related. I can take some of that skill set and transition over. Um, but yeah, like I said, I had all my eggs in that collegiate coach basket, so it was rough for sure.
Yeah, I think I went through this transition of like, man, I just invested the last 10 years of my life into this thing and put everything into this, and I'm just going to leave it. Which is what drew me into the online coaching and starting to coach in a different capacity. And I'll be honest, I fucking hated online coaching at first. I thought it was so impersonal. And then I started to realize that there were ways and tools and strategies that I could implement to make it more personal and to make better connections. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I actually do really enjoy this. Right. Like I see it as an opportunity to scale my impact so much more. For me, with the identity piece, I realized that my identity wasn't as a collegiate coach. My identity was tied into someone who positively impacts other people. So I just had to find a different vehicle for that identity. And for you, it could be, equipment sales or online coaching or the education that you do with Conjugate U. Um, it doesn't really matter. But I think once you detach yourself from the occupation and you get a little bit more clarity on it, was there anything that you did during that time to kind of help you get that clarity, or was it just time?
Um, you brought up a really good point, like impacting people.
Hmm.
That was another thing. Um, and I want to kind of, I want to make sure I don't forget about how I the transition.
Yeah.
Like people would always talk about impacting. Oh, we have so much impact and this and that. And I would always brush that off like, whatever, dude, you just coach and do your job and the kids kick ass and they love it. And you know, let's not get too freaking, it was, I don't know. But anyways, I think it was my last year of coaching within the last 2 years. My college football coach got cancer and passed away. And I remember we went up to a service with a couple guys that are in the area that I played with. And the fucking line at the funeral home this building was huge. The line was like wrapped around inside the building and down the fucking block outside, and then I was like, man, it's kind of too bad I realized this later on, but within that last year, I was like, I have a really good opportunity to impact a lot of people and I need to take that more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I kind of saw that and then I kind of went back to work. I was like, okay, yes, we're doing all these great things, but we can really, and I kind of saw that too as I was leaving. I had kids messaging me who I thought didn't give a shit about the weight room or whatever, like,
Same.
oh, fuck. I probably missed some opportunities to really make a big difference, and then, so kind of like you talked about making that transition, it did help make that a little easier. Like you said, okay, I'm not in the weight room personally on a personal level, or more intimate level impacting these people, but we can scale this and get it out to a shitload more people, that's, so I was like, okay, so we'll get high school kids excited about being in the weight room and we're going to have that many more little meatheads running around, loving to train and get better at their sport. So it definitely helped with that transition, kind of, like you said, getting out to more people and we can make more impact.
I love it. I love it. So I got to ask this question. Why do you have such a hard on for conjugate?
Because it worked. I don't know. It's like you mentioned earlier, like when you were kind of learning about it, it just made sense.
Yeah.
Um, so I've always been a meathead. In college, we didn't have like a designated strength coach. So, me being a 19-year-old kid, of course, I knew better than what we were getting. So I was always looking, I went through the Husker Power stuff, the hit. I tried every single freaking thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then going into my senior year, no, I don't know, towards the end of playing football,
Yep.
I read Dave's article, the Periodization Bible Part 2, which was basically like
Yep.
conjugate for dummies. And I read it and I was like, this makes so much sense. You know what I mean? Like do some heavy stuff and then explosive stuff. And then I build tissue with all the accessory work and prevent injuries. So I tried it. And then senior year, I felt great, like the best I'd ever felt. And
Yep.
then after senior year, I went in and tested my bench and I was almost as strong as I was before the season, which never happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it was like, that was kind of one of my light bulb moments. I'm like, this is awesome. It freaking works. And I've always kind of been like anti-establishment person,
Yeah. I
so
could see that.
that was part of the draw too,
Yeah.
and then it's always, talk a little shit and,
I always found too, like when you
excuse me.
I like to think laterally about things too. So when you look at a training system, yeah, it's sets and reps, but what are the secondary and tertiary things that you're getting from those sets and reps? And when I looked at athletics and then I looked at conjugate, I'm like, well, in athletics, there has to be an element of arousal. There has to be an element of like getting sympathetically driven to explode into a person. Well, how can I mimic that in a weight room? Well, that's max effort. Okay. I also have to be explosive for long periods of time and be able to sustain that max effort strength or that max effort rate of force development. Well, that's dynamic effort method. Well, and then I also have to have some element of stamina. Okay, well, we're doing conditioning work. And I start to realize I'm like, well, if I start working on all these qualities at the same time, I'm also getting a psychological benefit. I'm also tailoring to the needs of the athlete with regards to structural imbalances and things like that. So why do I have to be tied to this hypertrophy strength power, or this linear periodization model when I can just do all this shit at the same time? And like you, then I was like, all right, well, if this makes sense, I need to know why it makes sense. And I started to read, Buddy's stuff. I started to read James Smith's stuff. I started to read a lot of Louis' stuff. And at that, I had already been exposed to Elite FTS at that point, at the end of my undergrad. But then it just really started getting ingrained. And I had great mentors in the college level, like, Frank Wintrick and Mark Hickok, and then Hammer, and then, all these other guys that was kind of encouraged me to keep learning. And I always found myself coming back to conjugate. And even when I look at the training programs that I write now, they don't look like conjugate, but there's elements of it. Like I don't do a max effort dynamic effort. But I do use wave loading, and I look at, max effort work as, well, max effort work doesn't have to be singles. It could be sub max effort work for skill work. And whether I'm coaching a Navy SEAL or I'm coaching a soccer mom, they all still need varying aspects of the spectrum of max strength, speed strength, hypertrophy. It just matters like how much of that pie chart is allocated to different resources, and then you tailor the program to that. Why do we have to get all complicated and shit?
Yeah, and I've seen it time, and like you talked about, like with the athletes, the arousal and stuff, time over and over again, we would see the kids who weren't really into training, and then they would start, getting jacked up about, because I didn't program out ahead. It was just you come in, see what's on the board, and you go. You
Yep.
know what I mean? It teaches them to kind of deal with that. I don't know what's going on, but I got to step up and, make shit happen type thing. And
Bit of chaos. Yeah.
yeah. And, and like you said, that's what I like. That's what I like about, like, we were looking back, we were probably closer to like a traditional West Side template than a lot of schools were.
Yeah.
Um, but like kind of like you alluded to too, if you kind of stay within that basic framework, you can do a ton of different things with it.
Yeah.
But I've made the mistake too of getting too far away from it, and then I see the results drop, and it's like, okay, we got to come back to center a little bit.
Did you ever struggle with like training your athletes like lifters?
Yeah, I did. Probably something I did, like a mistake I may have made. Um, I took Donnie Thompson's squat cycle, and I was running that
Okay. I know where you're going with this, but okay.
for close to a year going into the meet that I hit 1,000, and
Yeah.
it worked really well for me. And this is kind of usually how things went. I would test things out. Throwers were around for the summer or whatever, so they'd kind of be the guinea pigs. Worked really good for them. Like, I mean, everything, like their jumps were going up, and we weren't jumping much at the time. So then it would kind of trickle down to like baseball and sprinters were the next two groups that would come in and get the secret sauce. But like that's a great program. But I think with athletes being out, so with him, he didn't vary his stance as much.
Mm-hmm.
So I was starting to see like our throwers, their hips were starting to bother them a little bit because they were out wide all the time.
Yep.
So talking about getting too far away from the traditional conjugate template, for athletes, we needed to throw some close stance work in every third week or something like that. So they're not way out wide all the time. But then I kind of got over the years, I obviously took the sport they were doing into their training consideration,
Of course.
but I think a better way to kind of guide them and accelerate their potential,
Mm-hmm.
give them lifts, like judge their programming or design their programming to where they're at in the weight room.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
okay, they can handle bands and chains and, so we're going to do bands and chains, but like men's basketball, their drive to train and motivation may not be there. So we got to scale that down. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So we're giving them as much cool shit in the weight room as they can handle. And it seems to help their sport performance. So I guess I was kind of training them like lifters a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't necessarily see that as a problem, to be honest. Like you could get into the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts, and people will talk all the time, especially now, about like evidence-based practice. It's like, well, if the guys are getting less injured, their performance is going up, does it really fucking matter how we got there? I would argue that no, but I'm also not a college strength coach anymore for a reason. Um, I just love the fact that you mentioned that you were experimenting on yourself, and that level of experimentation is something that I think a lot of people miss because they're just in the weight room, exercising, whereas you're in the weight room training, and that level of experimentation leads you to some expedited learning and growth in the way that you work with your athletes. So I love that you mentioned that. Now, in your like, where do you see your career trajectory going now from a strength and conditioning perspective? Are you like full go into equipment sales and that's what you do, or is online coaching something that you want to dive into more and grow?
Um, I'm fully in the sales. The online thing, I would like to grow that. I think there's some room for some growth there. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? My ultimate goal is to relocate with a house with a like a barn on the property.
Yep.
Maybe not even a barn, but like a separate building where I can
Mm-hmm.
get 3 to 4 racks and I can get some local people training. There's a part of me that needs to be back in the weight room. You know what I mean? But that being said, like I can still do what I'm doing now full time.
Yeah,
You know what I
for
mean?
sure.
We can kind of scale both things, but that's probably a couple years down the road. On
On
that.
I've been out of the weight room for a while now, and I'm like, there's still that itch. I don't think that ever goes away. Like
Yeah.
being in the weight room with that like 18 to 22-year old or 17 to 22-year-old age group, there's just something special about that level of energy, uh, and the level of impact, as we mentioned before, that you can have on someone of that age. And even though I love the flexibility of our work being fully remote, part of me is like, hey, when we relocate to South Carolina in a couple of months, like, what's going to stop me from putting some shit in the garage and starting to do more in person? But I always fall back to like, it's not as much money. And so I think something that I preach to the coaches that I work with is there has to be an element of your business and your work that's that scratches an itch. Because if
Yep.
you're only working to work, it doesn't matter how much money you're making, you're not going to be fully happy.
Yep.
So I feel like what you're saying resonates highly with me. It's like, if there's an itch and you can scratch it, I mean, a good equipment sales guy. So why not fucking put some shit in your garage?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a couple friends that are doing pretty well, doing some stuff in their garage. So like you talked about that itch. Like I'm scratching the itch currently,
Mm-hmm.
but you talk about like the in person thing. Like society needs more of that. Let's fucking go type stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I
fuck
have a
yeah.
friend. I have a friend who's down in Jersey. He's a strength coach at a Catholic high school,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, to people who aren't in this space, you say he's like abrasive or says the wrong shit, or he's too whatever. And I told him multiple times, I'm like, keep doing what you're doing. Like, kids don't get this shit anymore. They don't have
Yeah.
someone in their ear like, let's fucking go. Like everything's so soft and like, no man, this is athletics. Go fuck shit up. You know what I mean? Like, let's go.
That always puzzled me because like you play a sport, especially like you talk about football, like you play a sport that involves running full speed at another person with your face to hit them in the face. At some point, you just got to, in the words of Marshawn Lynch, sometimes you got to hit a motherfucker in the face.
Over and over and over.
That's I went on a bit of a binge the other day watching Marshawn Lynch clips, and it just fired me up so much. I loved it.
Dude,
Um,
he's awesome. I can't believe Buffalo got rid of him. Oh,
yeah, you guys fucked that one up real big.
yeah.
Where would you relocate if you don't want to be in Buffalo anymore? I mean, -4 Fahrenheit sounds amazing, but where would you relocate?
Not even relocate, just like another house.
Mm.
I could like, I would like some warmer weather, but my kids are here and stuff. They're kind of,
They're
I've
kind of
been here
tied
my
to
whole
it.
life. So yeah, we,
How
we, we just need a bigger space.
how old are your kids now?
16, 14, and 12.
Oh, they'll be out of the house soon.
Yeah, it's
You can go do
coming.
whatever you want. Yeah, we're actually moving to just south of Charlotte, North Carolina in April.
Nice,
So
dude.
we're in the process of getting all of our immigration stuff sorted out. And one of the big things that we want to do, because we want to start a family, we're looking at, okay, we got to get a house that has a detached garage, and that garage is just going to be for training, right? Because my wife's an IFBB pro, and I'm an old meathead. We got to have somewhere to train.
Have to.
We have to. So tell me a little bit about how you look at training in your life now, because I know you had a number of injuries towards the end of your powerlifting career. How do you look at training now? How does that fit into your life?
Um, Still probably top three priority.
Okay.
Even though it's, but it's like we have to do. And over the pandemic, I really kind of found this out. Like I remember when everything was locking down, and I didn't have equipment in my house at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? They're shutting down for a couple weeks. I'm just right. I've been training for so long. Like I'm going to take a break and not like, I don't need to, you know what I mean? Just take a break. Let's say it's a month. I'm not going to touch the gym. Just get a break and chill. And well, like 3 weeks in, I'm like a complete asshole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, just I have to have that. I have to be, like I said before, we're working on 4 plates right now. Like I have to be striving. It's not enough for me to do that. Like we do it in our professional lives too, right? Like,
Yep.
okay, last month I did this. This month I got to do this. I got to chip along. Here's my goal. It's not the same.
It's
You
not
know,
the
I
same.
I don't know if I don't know. I don't know if my former ancestors were, digging ditches or whatever, but like I have to have that physical stuff. And you talked about training in front of your athletes. It's funny, like it always kind of seemed, and this could have been just because I was in a better frame of mind or whatever, but I always kind of felt like as my training was going, so did everyone else's. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? And I get that now. Like if things are going well in the gym, everything else seems to kind of take care of itself.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was struggling with. Like after my injury, I was like, well, what's training going to look like for me at this point? And I knew that as soon as I had the ability to push, I'd be okay. It's like if I can get to a point where I can push again, I'll be okay. And that doesn't need to be 800-pound squats anymore. It could be like today. I'm 6 months post injury, and I'm like, I got worked up to 2 plates on the pendulum squat. I'm like, well, a full depth pendulum squat. I hit 10 reps with a really long pause. I'm like, I don't have any pain. I can start pushing again. Oh, we're back. Like mentally, I kind of flipped on, and I've been on fire ever since all day. And the way I look at my training. You mentioned when you're training around your athletes and your training is going well, their training tends to follow suit. For me, I use my training as a proxy for my productivity in the rest of my life. Because if I can make my training the hardest part of my day, everything else is easy. And we talk about identity shifts. Like my identity is no longer tied to Paul the powerlifter. It's tied to Paul the guy who trains hard. And a lot of great shit comes from that. I'm 240 with abs now. That's fucking sick. And other things come along with that. So it's training to me is, you mentioned you need it. For me, I don't like to say that I need it, but I definitely use it, and I use it as best that I can. I look at training as like brushing my teeth. I'm going to brush
Yes.
my teeth every day. I don't get excited to brush my teeth, but it's going to happen. And I know that I'm going to have better oral hygiene because I brushed my teeth. I know that if I train, I'm going to feel better. I'm going to look better. I'm going to perform better in every other aspect of my life. Um, Talking about, home gyms, you work for Elite FTS. What do I need to have in my home gym? Let's make this a sales call, bro. What do I need in my home gym?
Thanks for calling. Um, so we talked a little bit about this earlier. When
Yeah.
someone comes to me, I want to find out what they need.
Yeah.
What do you want? What do you need from me? Do you want me to chime in? And you know what I mean? And then it kind of, at some point, if let's say they leave out some essentials, I'll suggest, hey, what about this? Or have you thought about this? Or, when I was coaching, this helped us a lot. You know what I mean? So, because like a bodybuilder versus a quit power lifter and they're all going to have different things. Obviously you start out with your rack and your bars and specialty bars and, but like you rip both your legs apart, you, you probably want a leg press or leg extension or,
I
you know what I mean?
absolutely want a leg press.
So, like, what do you want? And then I'll kind of, here's what I think would be your best option. I try to talk less and listen more.
Well, one of the cool things about it, like I've had the pleasure of training at the compound a number of times, and I'm always incredibly impressed of the robustness of the equipment. Like Elite's equipment is bulletproof. Like you buy a rack, you're buying one rack for the rest of your life. You're going to be able to take that thing with you anywhere you go. But now with like the new cable stacks and all the new, like I was in there a couple months ago when we did the podcast. There's the full rack with the Smith machine attachment on the back end. And then there's the cable attachments that you can have to the front end of the rack. You could literally have one rack in your garage and do everything on it.
Yeah, that was like, that's what I like. Obviously I was a fan of the company, everything before, but like just looking at our products, that's why I like, and that's what it kind of fits into like my goal of getting in the high schools. Like
Mm-hmm.
our stuff is overbuilt, but it's not overpriced. We
It's
have a
true.
pretty
Yeah.
good, you know what I mean? People think but if you compare to like a lot of the industry standard for like high school and college weight rooms, we're, very reasonable, but like you said, the stuff's overbuilt and it'll last forever.
Yeah. I'm very excited for the home gym build out. Like I joke with my wife. I'm like, yeah, we're selling our house, but most of that money is going into a gym. She's like, that's 200, that's, $270,000 US. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Like, we'll use it.
Were you like housing up there is pretty expensive, right? So you guys should have a good, or is the dollar too messed up to?
We'll be all right. Like our mortgage is relatively small. So we'll walk away once we have the house sold. I think we'll walk away with around 270 US.
Okay.
The challenges that we're going to deal with is like our credit bureaus don't transfer over. So we'll have to rebuild our credit from scratch. Um, and so that means that we can't buy a home right away,
Right.
which isn't a huge deal. I actually look at it as a positive because if we move to South Carolina, we don't love it. We can just move somewhere else, as
Right.
opposed to like buying and selling a house again. The biggest challenge is going to be vehicles because I have to get rid of my truck. Olivia's is on a lease, but her lease runs out. And if we have to buy cars with no credit, we'll have to either pay cash or finance at a very high rate. So, I mean, there's the trade off though is my effective tax rate goes from like 60+% up here to 22% in South Carolina. I think that's a pretty good trade off.
Now it's 60%. Is that like your income tax?
So when you look at the combined income tax, taxes on goods, and our carbon tax, we as Canadians pay more in taxes on housing, food, and clothes than we pay more in taxes than we do on housing, food, and clothes combined.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus guns. I mean, guns are cool.
Yeah. Dude. Don't get me like, don't get me started on taxes stuff, but it's like, 20-30% for your income, and then 10. Whenever I buy something in New York State, 10% sales like comes out to like 50% of my
Yep.
money is gone. I work half the year for free.
Yeah, and then you have to pay for health insurance and all that other stuff. But there the way I look at it is you choose your evil.
Yeah, right.
The government's going to get their money one way or another. You just choose your evil. And for us, the opportunities in the US are just so much better, especially in the online space. And one thing that I'm trying to do with this podcast is, number one, showcase great people who do great things for other great people. The coaches that we've had on are all absolutely phenomenal individuals. But the other thing to showcase is that there's a lot of different ways to have a career in coaching, right? So for you transitioned your career in coaching to equipment sales and then a small online business. Who knows what that's going to end up being, but you can always fall back on the fact that you're a coach, right? You can always fall back on that. And, then when you transition to the number of ways in which you can leverage coaching to create the life that you want. I've had coaches on here who have, 7-figure online coaching businesses. And I've also had coaches on here who make, $100,000, are super happy and fulfilled and have a ton of free time to do the things that they want to do. And then I also have, people who have families that they prioritize. I had someone on the podcast who operates his business at enough of a clip that his wife is the primary earner and he's the stay-at-home parent. And to me, coaching is the best job in the world. And I still have the same passion for coaching that I did when I moved from Canada to Florida to do it. I still have that same passion. And I know for you, that passion is not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had friends that kind of transitioned out of, in the weight room coaching stuff, and they're kind of freaking out. And I'm like, it'll be all right. But I was like, just look at all the knowledge and you may think you're only a coach, but in learning that, you've built a huge skill set to do other things. You just got to
Absolutely.
take a breath, sit down, and figure out how you can work all that into something else.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
all the time you put into kind of developing that. You can do other things with that. You just gotta figure out your path.
Exactly. Let me hit you with a few quick hit questions. First one, what's the craziest lift you've ever seen in your weight room?
Uh, College weight room.
Yeah.
Um, we had a lot of crazy shit, man. That's like you talked about the kids seeing me do 800 pounds or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, looking back, like it was so cool. Like our throwers, I would let them throw briefs on and stuff. You know what I mean? Like it
I
wasn't a
remember
big,
that. I thought that was wild. I thought that was fucking wild. I'm like, this guy has his throwers and briefs.
like a couple of those guys got up to like 800-pound squats. Um, John Jones, our national champion, he benched 550 raw. That's kind of how I blew my shoulder out, was chasing that guy. Uh, I had, and to kind of go to the others, we had a women's basketball player who was with Hammer for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she came in, she was like 6'3", probably close to 200 pounds or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We got her squatting 2 plates on the yoke bar. She did it. I have video somewhere of her doing like a kneeling jump off the floor to her feet, like starts on her knees, jumps up to her feet, like that. That was pretty cool. But like just you see stuff online and like the whole room's going crazy for somebody squatting 6 plates. And like, our guy, I posted one time, one of the dudes had like 8 plates on, and everybody's just, it's just like another day at the office. You know what I mean?
I love that.
Um, but yeah, those are probably some of the top things. Like we had our baseball guys, a bunch of guys pulling 6 plates. I had a track, like 195-pound track kid pulled sumo off of the second pin with 2 chains on the bar. He pulled 675 sumo.
What?
Yeah. One of our sprinters who was under 200 pounds, 100-meter guy, he did 6 plates to a parallel box, like legit box squat, sit, pause, hit it up. Like we had some really, like across the board, we had some awesome kids.
That's fucking sick.
Yeah.
What's one mistake you made early on that actually ended up serving you in the long run?
Ooh. a mistake that actually helped me out. It's hard to come up with any mistakes, bro.
Yeah, you're just fucking perfect.
No, I think the coach thing we talked about, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like communicating with the coaches, and even the impact thing we talked about. I'm trying to, I realize I screwed up, so you know what I mean. Going forward, I'm trying to not make that mistake again.
Yeah.
Realize the opportunity you have and the impact you can have, and when I'm talking with people, shut my mouth a little more, try to listen a little more. And
I think we all make that mistake.
yeah, I see that a lot with like young interns and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to think, and I probably did this too. They tend to think, they think along the same lines as you do as far as training, and they're there because you saw they did a decent job at something. Um, but at the same time, they're willing to, you know, speak up and talk shit about somebody else because they do it differently or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, bro, you're an intern, like relax a little bit. I did the same thing. Looking back, I did the same thing.
I think that's an ego thing. Like you're trying to compensate for the fact that you probably not looked at as someone who's as serious as someone else, and then you try to overcompensate for it.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
talk a little bit too much. But I think we all go through that. If there was one message that you could have on a billboard for everyone to see, what would it be?
Control what you can control. Don't worry about the other shit.
I think that's a great message for life.
Yes. My mind went directly to like just politics and the Twitter stuff, and like I don't watch TV very much,
Mm-hmm.
but school's been canceled for a couple days up here, so everybody's home, and like the shit that's on TV, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah, none of it matters.
It's so easy to get sucked into it.
Yeah,
Like
none of it matters. That's
the
one thing that I've
noise.
come to realize. In Canada, you guys have your political situation down there. We have ours up here, and I don't want to make this a political podcast, but if more people realized how little that stuff actually affected their lives, they would be so much happier. And you make your own bed first too. Like before you speak about the political situation, make sure that your situation is hemmed up, and you don't want to throw stones from a glass house. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
The last question I have for you: if there was one person that you would like to see me interview on the podcast, who would it be? The caveat is that you have to help me get them on the podcast.
Well, going back to my sales training, who would you like to have on the podcast? Who could I have you get on?
Fuck off.
Damn, I don't know. Who would I like to see on the podcast?
Get me Buddy Morris.
You just asked for $100,000 weight room for 10 grand.
I know. Oh, I know what I did, sir.
Damn, I don't know. You know what's funny? Like and I started to get this like towards the end of my coaching stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The one day in my office, I was talking to my assistant. I'm like, dude, I'm so tired of hearing about what everybody does in the weight room. It's like, you know what I mean? And I don't know what it was. It's just like I haven't dove deep into training, and this is probably not good to say.
No, it's
But
great to see.
I don't tend to dive into training super deep anymore because it's like I kind of have a system, and you know what I mean? Like I'll pull little nuggets from here and there, but like in my like early 20s, like I would, dive into super training and dive into West Side and all this other stuff. My brain hasn't been there in a long time.
So the reason I say it's a good thing that you're saying that is I don't think that that's the thing that will move you forward. And I think that's true for most people because over time you will come to develop a system that works for you. You'll develop a framework that's malleable based on the application. But I actually recorded a podcast for a friend of mine this morning on his podcast, and I was talking about, I'm really agnostic to the methodologies, but I'm religious about the results. So I really don't care about how we get there as long as we get there. And the common denominator in everything that we do is people. So the barrier to getting someone results is the fact that they are a human being. So is the thing that's going to help get them results more knowledge on training, more knowledge on periodization, or is it just understanding people to a higher degree? I think it's probably the latter.
100%.
So I totally resonate with that. Nate, man, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you and touch base. It's been way too long. I'll have links to where everyone can find you in the show notes, but I really appreciate your time in coming on.
I appreciate you having me. Like you said, it's been too long. It was good catching up, man.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you everyone for listening. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and we'll catch you on the next one.